if you don't know who Brian Eno is, frankly, I can't help you. You shouldn't be here. Bette and I are rather less august, but we're getting there, aren't we, Bette?
I don't know, maybe this is helping.
Maybe this is helping. So Bette Adriaanse, deeply beautiful, wonderful human who I'm become a friend over the last little while. Also an artist, novelist, and an educator in the arts, and has worked with Brian together to create this beautiful book, What Art Does, an unfinished theory. And we will be referring to that fairly extensively through the conversation.
There's a great book by a Russian writer called Sergei Yurchak, and he was writing about the last generation of the Soviet Union. And the book has a beautiful title. It's called Everything Was Forever Until It Was No More. And that sort of captures the fact that communism dissolved overnight. It evaporated over one night. One night, it was a huge empire. The next morning, it was gone. It was no longer an empire. And so it's about the idea that change, when it happens, can happen very, very suddenly, very quickly indeed. And it can be quite radical, as it was in the Soviet Union. And he has a nice sentence in there. At least I think he does, though I've never been able to find the sentence again in the book.
I think you should just start claiming it for yourself.
I think maybe I did think it up, yeah. I went through the whole book again. He says revolutions happen in two phases. The first phase is where everybody realizes that things have gone completely wrong, sort of the phase we're in now. The second phase, and the important one, is where everybody realizes that everybody else has realized it as well. And at that point, that's when you get a big change, when you look around and you think, we're all in the same mind. We all know it.
And we start to build something else.
Yeah, you start to build something else, or you start to destroy something old, which is, of course, what is happening in America now.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a revolution. We're in a revolution now. Trouble is, we didn't recognize it because we didn't start it. You know, we expected the revolution to come from the left, but actually it came from the right, and it's the wrong revolution. Unfortunately.
So it's time to start another one, my friends. When I was reading this and having that initial reaction, which I did have to the idea that play is something that we need to champion, and then talking to you, reading the book more, it made me actually think of my favourite story from the research for my book, which is the transformation of the Taiwanese government, Taiwanese democracy over the years, over the last 10 years or so. And I won't tell it in full here now, but the core of this story is that in response to a communication from government in around 2012 that essentially said, shush little people, just go shopping, we'll grow the economy and you'll be fine, a group of hackers, sort of computer artists, you might say, started to play with what they thought government might be like, and what they did was they created parallel websites to government websites, all with the URLs that ended g0v.tw, and they called themselves gov0. And they were playing, effectively, they were making art. And actually it became very serious because on these websites you could participate in the decision-making. You could discuss it at home. You could be part of it. And a couple of years down the line, a big protest moment came. I might come to you to say a word about that protest moment in a moment. And the result of that protest moment actually was that the operations of government over time largely stepped into the operations of Gov0. But I interviewed a few people around that moment in the research for the book, and a couple of different people said to me, if it hadn't been adopted, it would just have been an art project. Yeah. And so that idea of actually, even if something as serious as how we do democracy differently really does need us to play. And I am going to make so in the Taiwanese moment, there was a thing called the Sunflower Revolution in 2014. That people occupied the parliament, and art was more a part of that moment as well, right?
Yes, I heard Audrey Tang talk about this revolution, and I was just curious, did they have a song? Because a lot of revolutions and big changes have a song, and they did have a song. I think it was called Sunrise Island, and when everybody was occupying the universities, there was this a band member who felt very passionate about his friends being there and being unsafe and being away from their homes. And he wrote the song in one night. And what I really like about the story is that, which ties in with the notion of play, is that not all the lyrics had to do with political stuff or trying to achieve things, or, you know, the lyrics aren't, we want a revolution and we need the government to do this and this. A lot of songs that embody a movement don't have anything to do content-wise with the stuff that people are rationally thinking about. And that's, I think, very often where we go wrong with art, when we combine art and politics, is where we think we want more inclusion. Here we have a musician. Let the musician make a song about inclusion, and then the people will like it, and then there will be more inclusion.
So Simon Duffy, first, Simon's going to be mildly embarrassed. I consider Simon a real kind of mentor and forerunner in the work I try and do in the world. To our right, Martyn Sibley. I consider Martyn a kind of friend, fellow traveller, and basically a sort of version of me who happens to be affected by spinal muscular atrophy. So Simon, we're basically the same age. We both started our careers kind of working in marketing and communications, and have been sort of digging at the edges of where that works and turning from thinking of people as consumers to thinking of people as citizens. And I love the way you introduce yourself. Like, he's basically bonkers as well, right? Like, serial entrepreneur is annoyingly, by claiming that he is a sort of version of me with muscular atrophy, I'm talking myself up way too much, basically, is all you need to know. So now you've started Purple Collective.
Yeah.
Just give us a little flavour of Purple Collective.
Yeah, so a very tangible example was around airlines and the problems with medical, like wheelchairs basically being damaged, and people being damaged, including myself. I got injured a year ago being lifted off a flight. And so that's an example where, in theory, airlines, if they were better for disabled passengers, you can speak to, you might have more customers because you open up the market. For whatever reason, that's just not working. In economics, we call it market failure. So that's when you need legislation, and there isn't legislation. So then you need organising and activism and campaigning with the media to try and get everyone to understand wheelchairs being broken and people being injured is not good in any time, but certainly in 2024, as we said earlier, we can catch rockets with clever chopsticks, but we can't help someone like myself get on an aeroplane safely. So that's what kind of was the preamble to, when you get a lot of people coming together on a topic, you can actually get the media attention, you can get government attention, you can get brand attention. And so the Purple Collective is a platform to unify, and we talked a bit earlier, so I meant not just disabled people, but everybody's voice, that there's no reason that everything shouldn't be inclusive. So that's the big fluffy vision of what the collective is, but then there's like day-to-day tangible things around organising and actions and stuff like that.
And it's a space where you're bringing people together to figure out what together you want to do, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's a cooperative. It's very the community decide like what are the campaigns we care about, what are the issues that need solving. So it's not from that sort of historical, someone starts something and they make all the decisions. It's everyone has a vote. It's a very democratic citizen organisation, and the cooperative model as well means that if and when funding pours in, that's all very much by the community for the community.
And I think you just said everyone's welcome in that, right?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah.
Join the Purple Collective. Woo. Okay, great. And we're starting to introduce you into this, Simon. So you, I gave you a little bit of you now have to be deeply impressive, obviously, with every word you say. But maybe you could just give us a bit of a flavour of your journey to this point, and how you've been working for change from within things as they are a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yes. So I suppose the time you're going to school or being born, I had my kind of first proper job after packing plastic dinosaurs at the Natural History Museum. 1988, I turned up. I was an NHS general management trainee, and I turned up at one of these institutions as part of what was called the Cook's Tour, where you got to see every bit of the NHS. And yeah, it shocked me to my foundations that this is how we were treating fellow human beings. The culture, the building, everything about it was kind of horrible, except the people. I kind of loved the people, like, and then I was shocked at myself to discover that I think I was to have been 23, and like I'd never met anybody with a disability. So this is like the other side of the story. In a way, there's like people like me, but I'd gone to a comprehensive school in Durham, and I just never met anybody. I'd not met anybody with an intellectual disability. I'd never met anybody with a physical disability. I'd gone to university, none of those things. So that's the generation I come from. And my training fits you for nothing, but it was in philosophy. So like one of the things that really I wanted to understand, I wanted to try and do something about it. So that's led to the kind of 30-odd year career I've had doing stuff. But I also wanted to understand why we were doing it. And so I think that I don't think it's competing narrative, but I do think it's part of the complexity of the narrative. Like, so there was a great thinker of the time called Wolf Wolfensberger, who actually led a lot of the work on deinstitutionalization, but he talked about the way in which people's social status was undermined by the way social structures were organized. So like the institution didn't just capture people, it kind of presented people back to people in a different way, if that makes sense, and so on and so forth. And then there was another amazing...
So just pausing that, so the institution, people are put in the institution, and then there's a story told about them to the world.
Exactly. I mean, I remember that even as a schoolboy, the only thing I knew about disability was that there was a special school somewhere. It was just a name of a village outside Durham where they went. You knew nothing more. But that's part of a social narrative, isn't it? That there's them that go there. It's also a story of exclusion that you feel even when you can't process it. Yeah. So you know that there are some of you who will go there if you don't do the right thing. Yeah. So. And I think the medical model is part of it, but up from my house in Sheffield, there is a huge building. It looks very grand on the outside, but that was the workhouse, right? And the workhouse became the asylum. The workhouse was about controlling ordinary people in Sheffield at the time of capitalism. So the roots of this aren't just about the medical profession inventing labels and categories. It's actually about social power, class, industrialization, creating systems of power and control over people. And those forces are really still in play. They're still in play in the kind of meritocratic culture of our society in terms of the elite values that assume some people are better than other people. So that's, I would say there's an even a bigger story than the immediate disability story, which is about power and control. And my work is very much focused on, how do you shift power conceptually? How do you think differently? So that's the appeal of the category of citizen, about each other. How do we think about each other differently? But I've also focused a lot on very practical things, like how can you move economic power into the hands of disabled people.
So, welcome Baratunde and Elizabeth to the Conduit.
Sorry, thank you. It's good to be here. Hi, Conduit. Hi. Are we feeling extra conductive?
Conductive?
Well, like electricity, like a conduit that runs like electrical wire, like conducting energy, flowing with ideas and renewed democracy.
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
We have some envoys from Planet America in the room, and we all like a conversation about democracy without sort of a bit of an understanding of how it feels over there right now. And we're going to talk about a democracy that goes way beyond elections, but this election is a pretty big thing. Can you just help us land in the space? Maybe Baratunde go first, Elizabeth kind of riff off with how it feels to be in there and in that space right now.
Everything's going great. It's rather perfect. We're a model democracy doing model democracy things. Everything's going according to plan.
Elizabeth.
No, it's been, look, the vibes in America have shifted. They were droll. There was like a funereal vibe going for a while as we were death marching toward November 7th with a degree of uninspiration, a degree of feeling sort of forced to choose between options that literally most of us didn't want. And that felt kind of hostage-takey vibes to it. We're not in that situation anymore, and that's a great relief in terms of Joe Biden having been shoved/choosing. Sometimes you get shoved and you choose to land on your feet, and I think that's what he did, and it was relatively graceful as these things could have gone. And Kamala Harris stepping in and obviously raising a lot of money, et cetera. So you can read all those things. I think there is a palpable mood shift toward possibility again. And that's not where we were. We were in the zone of obligation and suck it up and grin and bear it, as opposed to feeling like there was some light at the end of this tunnel that we could amplify with our own. And so I don't want to give too much to Harris herself. She has transitioned magically into this moment, and I think she is the recipient of latent love that people have for each other and for the possibility of our future. Whether she and we can fully convert it, we shall see in terms of a specific electoral moment and who wins, and more importantly, or at least as importantly, what we do after the electoral moment to try to continue to build power with each other. But we're back in the possibility lane as opposed to the definitely bracing for impact lane. Now, bracing for impact is a good thing to do, as well as imagine the future and work toward that, which wasn't entirely feeling like the energy, at least by my read.
There was a phrase that you threw in there that I hadn't heard before, the idea of like a latent love that's sort of ready to be expressed. Yeah. Do you want to pick up there, Elizabeth? And because you've talked a bit about this sort of emotional moment in democracy.
Yeah. I think I think with our podcast, what we were feeling back in 2020 was so much doom and gloom. We're divided narrative over and over and over. When we knew that so much good was being done, like so many people were working on really meaningful, impactful things, and it felt like a moment that we needed to go back to the basics. And so we came up with this idea of, citizen as a verb and these 4 pillars, which we'll get to, but that it was trying to conceive of it more as a way of being in the world, almost like a value set that each of us could enact and live out. Versus mechanics, right, of just how does the government function, and my only way to interact with this thing is to vote, which is very important, but it's not the only thing. And so I think in this moment, what we're seeing with the Harris campaign is a shift, and there's, different factions in all these campaigns and, behind all these candidates, different ways of thinking about how to move things forward. And what we're seeing play out, I think, is this shift from head and policy and logical arguments and fact-based arguments to something that's a lot more heart, right? This emphasis on joy, the vibe. What is the vibe? What do people want to feel? And it's, in my opinion, for the Democrats, they're playing into a playbook that the right has been using for a very long time in sort of tapping into and being concerned about how people feel. And not just, did we win the argument? Are we factually correct? And there's pros and cons, right? Like it can be a dark underbelly to kind of play to just emotion, right? So it's not just like rosy because that's happening. But I do think that it's important to recognize in the zeitgeist, especially I think with social media and things becoming less and less verbal and more image-based, that emotions and what we're taking in without many words or discussions. I mean, having debates and salons and, these things are really, sadly, kind of more and more, I think, in the past in terms of people communicating a whole lot just through memes. And you feel something with the memes, and that's how you should feel about the news in your week. And so I think that the rise of that lends itself to this kind of politic, and unless I think the Democrats recognize that strategy, which is, in my opinion, at the most primal level of how we behave as humans, we won't be on an equal playing field, I think, with how the Republicans have sort of been playing for a very long time. It's just the difference is they're playing on the primal fear kind of driver of emotion.
Yeah, I totally, unsurprisingly agree with that. And I think the additional note around latent love, it's something that we all share. We've kind of vibed with each other about the possibility of an invitation to contribute in more ways. That there is latent love, there is latent capacity to do more, to see oneself as a citizen and not just a consumer, to not just download, but to upload, and to peer-to-peer build something. And so there's a window opening again around that. The first campaign ad that Harris launched said, what kind of country do we want to live in? That's an invitation to dream and to imagine. And that it didn't start with, we must defend democracy. Like, what are you even talking? At first, defense is like aggressive, and I don't really know what this democracy you're talking about is. Look at voting rights, look at the history, look at the disenfranchisement, look at the conspiracy theories. But what kind of country do we want to live in is an invitation. It's a feeling and a vision that we can try to cast together. And so I think there's some room there to grow, and I certainly, after many catastrophes in the past, we've lamented not being asked to do more than like buy stuff or vote for somebody to do stuff for us. And both are very important forms of power, but we're capable of a lot more.
I really love that phrase, latent love. Like the sense that there was a sort of readiness to express these kinds of emotions that are there, and people are. And then the second reflection I have, I guess, on this is just thinking about this moment in the UK, like whether we're still in the head kind of thing, and whether we're letting ourselves step into a sense of joy and hopefulness that we could have, and I wonder and hope that that latent love might be an idea that can help us sort of break out of this cycle that we seem to be going in, not just in the UK, all over the world, of kind of ending up in a worse and worse decision between fixed set of options that don't really feel like anyone really wants them. So I'm gonna bridge us a little bit from here into so I think great to understand how it's feeling to be there, some lessons for us to draw in the UK and reflect on, I think.